So this turning point that occurred during the summer of 1971, which was between my third and fourth years in college, it's a turning point that I didn't realize at the time was a turning point, took place in the Catskills, upstate New York resort area, the Raleigh Hotel, South Fallsburg, New York. And like I said, I didn't even last the whole summer there. When the job first started, could have been 4th of July weekend. I don't remember when it started. It was like a small band. I don't remember exactly, but probably three horns, trumpet, saxophone, trombone, and rhythm section, three or four in the rhythm section. Possibly they could have augmented the band on weekends for shows that used to happen in the Catskills sometime. I don't remember if it happened on this gig, but that really doesn't have much to do with this story. What happened the first day, first rehearsal or the first gig, but the first day of the job, I don't know anybody. I did know one person on the band, the guy that got me hired on the band, saxophone player that I knew from school, but I didn't know any of the rest of the band. And so there was this trumpet player named Dominic Alloy from either Brooklyn or Bronx. I think he was Italian. Maybe a few years older than I was. I would have been 20 years old. He could have been in his mid-20s or 23, 25, something like that. So we show up for the first day, and we all have to warm up before we start to play. And so he starts his warm up, and next thing I know, he's playing, like pretty high, like high G's or above, double C's, whatever. And so at first, I thought maybe it was kind of a show off. Okay, so then maybe so the next night maybe the same thing, and then next night, third night, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, he's kind of a show off, but those are awful loud double high C's. I mean, he might be a show off, but there's some loud ass high C, double C's. And by the next night or whatever, I'm going up to him and asking him, like, how do you do it? Like, what are you doing? And so he starts telling me his teacher, his chop teacher in New York was a guy named Roy Stevens. And I had never heard of that name. And I told him that I studied with somebody in Philadelphia named Doc Reinhardt. And so he studied with this guy, Roy Stevens. So, I'm asking him questions like, what is he, what is his theories or whatever. So, as it turned out, this all didn't happen in one conversation either. This could be, over several days or whatever. And so Dominic starts to explain to me, some of Roy's theories. And what it started to sound like was sort of like the upstream side of what Doc Reinhardt, like I had said previously, he analyzed different players and categorized. Reinhardt had all these different types. Roy Stevens, he didn't go that way. Like he had sort of he acknowledged that people might have different irregularities in their teeth or whatever. Not everybody's built exactly the same. But Roy's approach to setting up an embouchure was, unlike Reinhardt, Roy's thing was more everybody should do it this one way, more or less. Okay, so I'll just hit some of the high points with all that. So, first of all, Doc Reinhardt, he would talk about the four legs. Like in others, when you sit your mouthpiece, on your chops, Reinhardt would talk about four legs, like four chair legs, four table legs, in order that that you had like a solid base underneath your mouthpiece. Well, Roy he said sort of the same thing, but in a different way. Whereas Reinhardt would talk about accommodating differences in your jaw structure or whatever, Roy would say you want to have like the same thing like the flat table underneath the mouthpiece, but now the idea was to have your teeth line up even, and that's how you were going to provide your flat base underneath the mouthpiece. In other words, and so what the end result of that was, your horn angle was going to be more straight out. There was going to be like none of this. Now, I mean, Roy might acknowledge that someone else might play such and such a way, with in other words, if your bell is down, maybe your bottom teeth are back a little bit from parallel with the top. But Roy was more advocating, in other words, like say if you played that way, let's say, then the goal was to try to start bringing your jaw forward so that your teeth would line up better, and so that would in other words create the flat base underneath your chops, and by doing so now you're going to have your angle, your lead pipe, the horn angle more straight out. Once again, I'm sort of getting out of sequence here. This guy Dominic didn't lay all this out to me right then. These are things that I found out later on. So anyway, that was what Dominic said in a nutshell. I'm trying to think if there. And one other point that I really wasn't really familiar with. Whereas back to Glenn Dotson and Reinhardt, as far as filling the horn and having good air support, such as that, Dominic, and this is Roy's teaching now, would talk. Yeah, you're going to have that air support, but you're also going to be thinking almost like velocity behind the air. Once again, this is back to the projection. Now, this is especially to go into the upper register. You're going to really start shooting that air, like in other words, rather than like trying to pinch it out by closing your chops and your teeth and all of that. In other words, rather than closing off to sort of squeeze those high notes out and it may be coming in with arm weight. Now, Reinhardt would say something of, it's okay to bring the arm weight in as long as you're equalizing it with air pressure going forward. Okay, that made sense to me. But now, the way Roy said kind of the same thing, but sort of phrased it differently, he was talking about like really shooting that air through at ever increasing velocity, pressure. Now, not necessarily bigger, but more focused, and then building up that airstream to go into the upper register. And then Dominic would do these kinds of exercises. Things like that. In other words, this is all air pressure, increasing your air pressure to go into that upper register. So that was a concept that I really wasn't familiar with until that. And just one other point. By this time, like I said, age 20, in my third to fourth year in college, not only from my teachers, but the other students I was with, and of course, we would talk to each other and say what we noticed someone else was doing, or what someone else's theories were. Because there were other methods around at the time. I remember there was a method called double high C in 37 weeks. Most of these methods were more towards trumpet, but of course the same principles could apply to trombone. Claude Gordon was another one at that time. So these were trumpet players. In my case, I was a trombone player at that point, but I was basically still a frustrated trumpet player in a way. Once I started to find out that maybe I could start getting some higher notes out on the trombone, well, then my objective, maybe overly so, was to try to compensate for what I could not do on trumpet well, let me try to do it on trombone. In some cases, that even meant like sort of in effect, like I'm playing even an octave higher and all. Like I said, this sort of a turning point here with these concepts of building the air pressure to go up higher. And what I started to notice, and what some of my other friends started to notice, brass playing friends, is that okay, there were all different kinds of embouchures and all different kinds of horn angles, and we all know that. And Dizzy Gillespie had his bell turned up, and all these kinds of things that we would see as we're trying to figure out like how to do all this. But it seemed we all sort of agreed that of the and this applied more to trumpet, but actually applied to trombone too. It seemed like more of the strong high note lead type players. I said guys. There weren't a whole lot of women doing that then. There's more of them doing it now than there were 50 years ago from where we are now. But more of the strong chop players, they all kind of had that horn straight out and or even up a little bit. I mean, it's not exactly the same. It's not, people have different teeth structures and stuff like that. That seemed to be uh, another part of this that I had forgotten. This also, of course, is very different than what you might call traditional teaching. Because I had forgot to mention this before. The Arbenz book, which I got a copy of mine, a trumpet. I never did get the trombone Arbenz book. I always had the trumpet Arbenz book. I still have it. So this goes back to 60 years, I guess, or more, that I've had my Arbenz book. And of course, as all of us know that have the Arbenz book, in the beginning, the introduction and the preface and stuff, there's the fingering chart, and there is a bit of a discussion about how you form your lips and what you should do to produce a sound, spitting seeds, these kinds of analogies. Like if you saw I guess there's a picture of Arben and all that, those kind of players, I mean, you didn't see anybody with the bell up like this. They were all and playing down, of course, maybe playing a little more controlled or whatever. The more traditional teaching, especially years ago, was kind of with the bell down and all that. And now here come these high note guys, that are more up like this. And I mean, a funny part of this is going way back there again, back to when I was a kid, like let's say 10 years old, 12 years old, still on trumpet, with an embouchure that was not developing right. My mother, who didn't know anything about, I mean, she played a little bit of piano and stuff like that, but she didn't know anything about, blowing into a brass instrument. But one time she started ragging on me about, like, how come I didn't hold my bell up like they do on the Lawrence Welk show. And the funny thing of it was, of course, I'm way out of sequence here. The funny thing of it was, in the end, she had the answer that none of my teachers had at that point. None of my trumpet teachers, private teachers, when I was in junior high and all that, not one of them ever got into this whole thing of talking about your jaw position. Some of them would say to smile, pull your corners out like this. Reinhardt would say smiling might enhance the personality, but it does nothing for your brass playing. And or like another description was, puckering, and that kind of back sort of like to the Arbenz embouchure, more like, puckering and tuku and stuff like that. So here come these. Of course, these were more, symphonic and chamber, brass quintet type players. Now you got Roy Stevens, and Stan Kenton and Maynard Ferguson, these kind of guys, and more of them. They got their bells up. And so anyway, like I said, so some of my friends and I, we were starting to notice these things. And now here's this guy who was a student of Roy Stevens. He was actually analyzing that way and saying that that's the way you go about it. By the time I got back to school in September of 71, I scheduled a lesson to go up and see this guy, Roy Stevens. But as it turned out, one or two of my friends, classmates in PMA, they beat me to the punch. One guy in particular, he that I know of, and maybe one or two others, they got and took lessons with Roy before I got there. I guess this could have been in fall of 71, early 72. And I had my senior recital in PMA in February of 72. And, my first lesson with Roy took place sometime around there.